the Nonprofit Podcast, powered by Donorbox.
Do you need a little help making those all-important asks to your potential donors this year-end? How about some help getting to know some influential people in your community who might be interested in supporting your cause? Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Cara, fundraising coach at Donorbox. We're here each week with practical actions you can use today to increase donations and take your nonprofit to the next level tomorrow. You know, your board of directors might just be your best backup this fundraising season. Today, I'm joined by Adam Morgan. Adam has more than 15 years experience in nonprofit fundraising and board development, plus so many credentials to his name. He's currently a frontline fundraiser with the Delaware Nature Society and a fundraising coach. And frankly, he's someone whose advice and perspective I always appreciate. So much so, I knew I had to share his invaluable insights into an area that can be tricky to navigate, especially as a small startup organization, and that's your board. Today, we're tackling the insights, information, and inspiration we all need to get our boards on board with year-end fundraising. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, Cara. Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, Adam, you've kind of seen it all, from small volunteer-led nonprofits to some of the largest nonprofits in the world and a lot in between.
Yes.
And you've seen how board outreach can really boost fundraising efforts, especially at year-end. So what benefits have you seen when volunteers reach out personally?
That's great, Cara. Thank you. Volunteers are such a key part of your organization. And sometimes I think we even forget that board members are volunteers because we work so closely with them day to day. So we have to kind of remind ourselves that, this is a volunteer thing for them. But as volunteers, they can connect so organically with donors, more so than staff and more so than even program participants sometimes, because they're investing their time and their talent and their treasure. And they get to talk about the personal fulfillment that they have for working for your organization as an outlet for a passion that they may have. And this can really come through to a donor, and they can engage donors in similar areas and similar passions and really have some really filling conversations and meaningful moments that drive change and transformation for your organization. So this can be particularly helpful by having those volunteers reach out ahead of time. So if you've got a year-end appeal coming out, we're coming up on Giving Tuesday, if you can prepare and encourage and prep your board to reach out ahead of those things, that might help you see a better return. Volunteers can ask for advice, and input from donors or potential donors. They can talk about new strategies or new programs. And sometimes a donor will have a more real conversation with a volunteer because they know it's a volunteer, it's peer-to-peer, versus, if they're talking to someone from the organization, they may think, oh, I'm talking to an expert. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable sharing this feedback. So you can get really valuable feedback that way. And then they can offer their perspective on impacts that they've seen through their work with the organization, something that they hear about or see day to day or something that connects with them personally.
Yeah, that's really great. So I think sometimes there's some apprehension about sharing like donor or prospect lists with those board members, event attendee lists. How can nonprofits really effectively and ethically too share those lists with board members? Anything they need to take into consideration?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that come to mind. So first of all, it is okay to share that information ethically and confidentially with board members and selected volunteers. So first, you want to just know who those volunteers are, right? And have a conversation with them about what they're going to receive, the purpose of the information they're going to get. I highly encourage confidentiality agreements to be signed just because it level sets the expectations of what a volunteer can talk about with a friend or a spouse or a partner. The donor bill of rights through AFP is something I really recommend sharing with those groups also, just so that they understand how your organization treats donor information as confidential and sensitive.
I love that.
And then once you've got sort of those expectations done about confidentiality of the information, do a first pass with your board to see if there are names that they even recognize. So at this stage, we can just be sharing names or maybe business or professional affiliations, right? So you're not sharing confidential information at this stage. You're just saying, hey, here are our list of our donors, our lapsed donors, of the people in the community who we want to connect with. Who do you know? Who's in your circle, your network? And then once you've kind of identified, okay, these are the people my board members know, or even, these are the people they don't know, but they're people we want to get in front of, that's when you can selectively share that information. So is it contact information? We said business affiliation. Are they a current or past donor and you want to share some historical giving information, maybe lifetime giving? And then if you're going to move forward with, a solicitation approach, then you can start talking about a strategy for your current ask. But don't share an overabundance of information, right? Like try to keep it a little bit limited and a little bit targeted to what they're actually going to use. So maybe they don't need the mailing and physical address. Maybe phone number and email is enough.
Okay.
The same thing goes if you're doing wealth screens, just be cognizant of too much wealth screening information.
So you touched on something, and that is asking board members to introduce their network, their colleagues, their friends to the organization. Board members might find it kind of daunting to provide a long list of potential supporters. So what tips do you have to share that might help these nonprofits make it a little easier for them to talk to their boards and ask them to contribute to that list generation?
I think in this scenario, I go back to the clear is kind method of communication, right? And my take on that is KISS. It's keep it simple, smarty. So try to make your request manageable. Instead of saying, share some names with us, rather ask for 3 to 5 names. Make it manageable. Make it something that someone can sit down either right there with you at that time or later that evening when they're at home on their phone. They can jot out some names, copy some email addresses from their contact list and shoot it over to you. So keep it manageable. The other side is if you have specific needs, if you are an animal shelter and you have a local pet store that you want to connect with, are there board members or volunteers who can make those connections? You could ask them for in-kind donations. You can ask them for in-kind sponsorships. There's lots of ways that your board can help you engage with the community.
Nonprofits always struggle with donor acquisition and introducing people to their missions. Many organizations require their board members to give financially to the organization. Can you provide some guidance on encouraging board members to give, or what are some best practices around that?
Yeah. So I have always heard the term give or get. And I don't really like that term because it kind of puts people, like makes them select into a bucket, or you're selecting them, you're making the decision for them, right? So I'm a big fan of sharing all of the ways that they can help and then letting them self-select into some of the ways they're comfortable with or most meaningful. We've also seen a trend where smaller and newer nonprofits are moving away from like a specific across the board minimum donation amount. So maybe it's that $1,000 a year or $10,000 a year if you're a university trustee or somebody. And they say something like, we ask that all board members give, and then they make us one of their top 3 charitable priorities. So it lets them sort of identify for themselves and their family what their budget is. And then, you kind of raise to the top of that list. I do think, though, that all board members should give. It can be a wide range, but letting them self-select in is often good. This can also help with board recruitment, right? If we are all talking about diversifying our boards, we want to go younger. There's a drive to have more program and client participants actually serve on the boards. We're reflecting the communities that we serve. So we're also then lowering barriers to board service and saying, you don't need to be a wealthy family or individual. We want people from the community. We want younger people to get involved now. So this lets you do that. Now, some will layer on that get aspect. So the idea is, can you ask board members to help you secure sponsorship for your dinner or sell gala or raffle tickets, those sorts of things. And that's fine. But I think the priority for me is always like having them contribute financially and in a meaningful way to them. And then everything else can kind of flow from there.
Any ideas on how to leverage those board gifts, especially at year end? What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you struggle to get the board to give, you can create a strategy around like a identified window of time to create like a board giving campaign. And at year end, like October, November is a great time. You can ask the board to give. Your executive and your board president can reach out personally to the board and say, hey, we want everyone to make a gift during this window. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pool those into a matching gift. And on Giving Tuesday and through the end of the year, all of our donations will be offered as a match to the community so that, when Cara makes a $50 donation, her donation is then doubled into $100. And that can really incentivize public and individual giving through the end of the year.
I really appreciate that. And I think that's very timely this time of year. Okay, so Adam, I actually got this question yesterday. Somebody said to me, I have a board member who didn't engage in fundraising last year at all. So how do I work with a board member who's underperforming in their fundraising commitment? What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought would be, how well do they understand their commitment? And are they showing up to the meetings? Are they showing up to other things? Are they involved in other ways? And so I think that is an okay question to ask and an okay thing to revisit with them. I've actually encouraged some groups to, every year we have to have conflict of interest form signed and confidentiality agreement signed by the board. Maybe it's ahead of an annual meeting or something. And so that time of year usually tends to be a good time to also put in front of the whole board or maybe an individual like that, this sort of recommitment to the organization policy. So whatever you want to call it, the idea is that it reaffirms their expectations for the year, allows them to opt in on all of those expectations. So how many board meetings they have to attend, what the events for the year are going to be. Is it a 5K? Is it an annual dinner? Those sorts of things. And also what their fundraising expectations are. Are they expected to give a gift? Are you going to ask them for a certain amount? So while you might not have a minimum donation, you may still have an idea of how much you want to ask for because they are still donors. And so you might present that to them. That sort of recommitment, that expectation and level setting is really good. Then allows them to opt in. They can ask questions. If you're 1 year into a 3-year board term, this might be a way for them to say, hey, I really love the organization. I don't want to leave you out, but I can't commit to all this. And that looks like me rolling off the board and volunteering in another way. Okay. And then, you as the organization and your board president or executive can have that conversation with them and see what fits. Maybe it is time for them to roll off the board early, or maybe you can find other ways for them to fit in.
Yeah. And talking about other ways to fit in, sometimes board members are a little more comfortable showing appreciation. And I think that that's always a good tool. In your experience, how can nonprofits involve board members in the process of thanking donors and do it well?
Yeah, this should be the fun and easy part, right? We all like to say thank you and celebrate our wins and our gifts. It's really hard to overthank our donors. Penelope Burke, the author of Donor-Centered Fundraising, used to say that donors can be thanked just 7 different times before they feel like it's overkill. This is not to say you have to thank people 7 times, but rather it's for the groups that just send one automated email acknowledgement and think that's enough. It's probably not, especially if these, we know most people who donate to multiple organizations. And so if you're the one who's under showing appreciation, they're going to move those dollars to other organizations. Penelope also says that a thank you from a volunteer, which again, board members are, is much more impactful than a thank you from even the top leadership of the organization. And a voicemail is as impactful as a live conversation. So what do we do to bring all this together? Your board should absolutely be involved in thanking, and all board members can do this. Set them up for success, though. So we need to do the same thing with thanking and showing appreciation as we would do to prepare them to make an ask. So set aside time during your board meetings for your board members to write thank you notes. Get in the habit of, every board meeting, you take the last 15 minutes and each person writes 3 to 5 thank you notes. Learn through conversations who likes making phone calls, then provide them with the information they need. A script, the contact info, whatever the recent donation information is, and especially if that donation is a restricted donation to a specific project or program. And then regularly share information about the impact of donors' gifts with the board. They will, like osmosis, sort of absorb this information, get used to hearing it. And so now when they're out writing those thank you notes, making those phone calls in the community, running into donors, they've got stories they can share and they've got connections they can make. And so they start to talk in their own voice rather than just reading off of a script.
Yeah, as a nonprofit leader, you can really set the bar and really feed the conversation. So, okay, big question. We always get something like this. Nonprofits have limited resources, right? There's never enough time, never enough money. What's your advice on where to start with board engagement if you're starting from scratch?
Great question. And I think the board should be a force multiplier for your organization. If you're a small organization, 1 or 2 people or 1 or 2 fundraisers only, let's look at how we can leverage that board to work for you in this case. Some ways you can do that. We talked about matching gifts. We're about to go into Giving Tuesday and giving season and end of year fundraising. So have board members not given yet, or did they give back in January and maybe it's time to ask for a second gift, and maybe we want to do this campaign in the next 2 weeks. You say, we would like a commitment and we're going to create a matching gift. We're going to use that to incentivize Giving Tuesday through the end of the year. We talked about new prospects. This is a great time. Do this now so that you can use this information over the next 2 months. Ask for a handful of names, 3 to 5 names. Get their phone numbers and email addresses at a minimum, and ask for names of people that they think might be interested in supporting the organization, right? You don't want just any name that they have. If there's a connection there, that's going to be better, and that's fine. And then ask if they can make those asks themselves. What do they need to be comfortable to do that? Is it email template, social media post, phone call script, writing a letter and having them sign it and then mail it? So there are ways that we can make it easy for the board members to ask. I did air quotes there, but make it comfortable and in their comfort level. But we already talked about thanking. That is huge. If a donor is thanked promptly and appropriately, they are more likely to become a forever donor or a multiple year donor or a multiple month donor. And so it's always about thanking them for the gift, but also knowing that thank you can have genuine and real return. And another way, if you've been around for a little while and you've got lapsed donors, this is a good time. You don't want maybe your staff to spend a time chasing down someone from 5 years ago. But if it's a name a board member recognizes, or if the board president can write a note that is, "Dear Cara, as the board president, I see all of the important work we do in the community. Last week, I saw how we helped a client with, whatever problem you helped with. You supported us in the past. We're hoping that you might be able to support us again this year." Those little notes and personalized outreaches where you're sharing impact and storytelling can really help move the needle.
I think everything I'm hearing is that we can't really expect our board members to step in and really take these initiatives on themselves. It has to be really led by the nonprofit, by the staff, by the team.
Exactly. I mean, they're volunteers, right? This isn't going to be what they do every day. As a major guest fundraiser, I've often said, donor might be the most important person on my mind, but I know I am not the most important person on their mind. And this works with the board, right? We may think about the board in our day-to-day and how we interact and work with them. They're not always thinking about us. And they do need that encouragement, that coaching, that prep. If you think about how much time it takes you to prep for a donor visit or meeting or phone call, it's going to be exponentially more for a board member who doesn't really know the process or the organization. So you've got to kind of feed that prep work, do as much of that as you can for them so that they can be successful and go out and do the things that they're good at, like talking about the organization, sharing their experience as a volunteer, why it brings them joy to personally give to you. Those are the things you want them focused on, not looking up emails and phone numbers and writing an email template.
For sure. Well, getting your board involved, it really is effective. It's a way to rally support and then achieve those fundraising goals, especially during this critical time of year. But I think it also signals a strong leadership commitment to the organization's mission when the nonprofit leader has their board behind them. Adam, one last question. So is it a good thing to bring all of this kind of stuff up when you're onboarding your new board members?
Yes, I think it goes back to those kind of expectation questions and comments we made earlier. The more that you can put those expectations out there from the start, the more that a new board member just sort of thinks this is how this works, right? Even if you're just starting it this year and you're bringing on a couple new board members, they don't know that. They don't know what happened last year. So they just think this is how this works. This is what we do. We thank our donors. We show appreciation. We help out with fundraising. So absolutely include it in the onboarding. Set aside time during every meeting. You're going to probably be talking about revenue and expenses and budgets anyway. So what better way to then show appreciation for the people who fund those things?
Thank you again, Adam, so much. These are all really, really practical actions that will really increase that lasting impact for so many organizations, for sure.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Well, good. Donorbox actually just posted a new blog that has some great essentials for board onboarding. So we will be sure to link that in the show notes for anyone listening. And thank you, our listeners, for choosing to spend your time with the Nonprofit Podcast. I hope you've left with the confidence to take a small step today that will make a big difference tomorrow. Be sure to click the download button on your podcast player, then leave the Nonprofit Podcast a review or give it a thumbs up if you're listening to the Nonprofit Podcast on YouTube. Your review really is a great way to help others find us. You're here to help others, and we're here to help you. So until next time, stay inspired.
That warm feeling when you help someone, it's not just happiness, it's fulfillment. And we believe it should be available to everyone, from frontline heroes to first-time fundraisers. Our tools empower you to help others. This is our mission. This is Donorbox, helping you help others.